I'm going to be sharing with you in this video 5 things that will absolutely ruin your self-trust. And I think that self-trust is one of the most important things that you need in your life. It doesn't matter what you desire in your life. If you want more money, you need self-trust. If you want a romantic partnership, if that's what you really want, you need self-trust. Maybe you want to work for a company of some kind. Maybe you just want to get a regular job. Maybe you want to be a really good learner at school. Maybe you want to become whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Anything that you want to become in your life, anything that you want to step into to truly become, you need self-trust. Without self-trust, you're not going to have anything that you desire in your life. And I think that there's really zero exception to this, because self-trust is the foundation upon which your entire life is predicated upon. Without self-trust, everything about who you are, your entire foundation is going to fall apart in your life. So I'm going to be sharing with you in this video 5 things that will ruin that self-trust, which would be detrimental to you becoming who you want to be. And of course, if you don't do these 5 things, you'll have a much higher probability chance, not that it's going to be guaranteed, but you will increase your probability of getting the things that you want in your life. Now, and I say it's not guaranteed because nothing in life, I believe, is guaranteed. There's risks to everything, but you can take the right steps and set yourself up for a proper foundation to get the highest possible chance of removing the things you don't want in your life and getting the things that you do want in your life. And so when you do that, you can get yourself into a position where it's almost impossible not to get what you don't want, meaning that you have a high chance of getting what you want. Almost pretty much little to no chance that you won't get what you want. So let's talk about that in this video. So if you're new to this channel, what I want you to do is I want you to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. Also, if you want to work with me one-on-one personally, all the details for that will be down below. Now, the first thing that I want to share with you in this video, in terms of the first thing that will absolutely ruin your self-trust in your life, is number 1, being indecisive. Okay, being indecisive is absolutely the worst thing you can do for your self-trust. I personally used to have this problem, and it still comes up for me from time to time. But what I've come to realize is that the best possible thing that I can do in my life is to be decisive. Because if I'm indecisive, everything in my life that I desire, every part of who I am, my character, my desires, my peace, my groundedness, all starts to go downhill. And the thing is that I used to be really scared to be decisive because I was afraid of making the wrong choice or something bad would happen. And I'm not saying that I don't get these kind of emotional patterns coming up within me from time to time, but what I've come to realize is how to navigate that energy of indecisiveness. It is an energy. It is a state. It's sort of like the energy of like indecisiveness is in of itself a choice to kind of like step into that space, if that makes sense. What I've come to realize is that being indecisive is absolutely a horrible thing for my entire well-being. And the paradox in terms of why we become indecisive is because we want to make sure that all these things in our life isn't going to happen, like these things that we don't want, certain failures, certain problems, right? We don't want these problems, so we need to be making sure that we're thinking, overthinking, and making sure we do the right thing. But it's like actually getting into the energy of, I need to think so much about this thing to make sure that all these bad things don't happen, and then being really indecisive, you end up creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where you manifest the exact thing you don't want. In my experience, at least. And instead, when I start to realize that actually I can just be decisive and absolutely commit to the choices that I make in my life, of course, weigh out the pros and the cons, of course, be extremely logical, of course, look at the pros and the cons of every decision, see the consequences of doing something, see the consequences of not doing something, because we always look at the consequences of making a choice, right? Oh, what's going to happen if I make this choice? Rarely do we think about the consequences of not making a choice and not becoming who we want to be. And so what I've come to realize is that no matter where I am in my life, when I get into an energy of indecisiveness, allowing myself to kind of like step into that kind of energy, and many people don't want to see it as a choice. It's like, oh, it's a choice to be indecisive? Of course. Of course it is. What I've come to realize is that when I don't allow myself to be in that sort of energy of indecisiveness, when you could say I stay away from that energy of indecisiveness as much as possible, and I decide to make a choice, I end up usually becoming much more logical and much more powerful in who I am and how I show up. And I've come to realize that the biggest risk that people think is like, well, isn't being fully committed to choices, isn't there a lot of risk associated to that? Now, I'm not saying to make illogical and bold choices that are going to be detrimental to your well-being and your homeostasis and your balance, and to remove having a supportive energy in your life. I'm not saying to do that. What I am saying, though, is that I've come to realize that most people believe, and I used to believe this, that like being decisive and committed, there's a lot of risk associated with being decisive and committed and focused on who you want to be and entirely committed to your choice. And you have to be fully giving your choice your 100% full attention and giving it all your energy. There's risk there, right? It's risky. But what people don't think about is that it's very risky to also not be decisive. Have you ever thought about that? When you're very indecisive and you don't make committed choices and you're kind of in these patterns of going left and right, taking 2 steps forward, taking 2 steps back, rather than taking small, consistent steps in a committed way towards your heart desire, there's like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, and then you're scared of taking risks so that you never commit to anything. There's a lot of risk associated with being that type of person as well. You know what I mean? There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of consequences to being indecisive that are usually, in my experience, a lot worse than the consequences of being decisive. Now, again, I'm not saying to be bold and illogical and to overthink your choices and then to overthink so much that you just make a choice that's like not going to be wise. I'm saying to be extremely wise about how you invest your money, about the partners and the relationships that you choose in your life, and to be extremely wise and to think about your choices. Don't just make choices that are going to be illogical. But what I am saying, though, is that if you think too much, I'm going to be talking about this in my book, by the way, that's coming out soon. If you think too much and you start to become really, really indecisive, like, oh my gosh, what happens is that's going to ruin your self-trust, and it's not going to be good for your life. In my opinion, in my experience, it never is a good thing for your life. It's always going to lead down, or most of the times at least, down a path that's just not fun, not enjoyable, and decreases your self-trust, to say the least. Now, the second thing that I want to share with you in this video, which is absolutely a critical thing to not do, that if you do this will absolutely ruin your self-trust, is blaming. Wasting your thought energy. And yes, you can waste energy around thinking about why this person is bad and why they are this way, and then getting angry about people. You could literally, that's energy. That's energy that you're using. You're using energy to blame somebody. What a wasteful what a wasteful way to use your energy, in my personal opinion. There's so many beautiful ways you could use your energy consciously to create what you want. But if you're blaming people, that's not helping them or you, right? In fact, if you stop blaming and you choose to focus on yourself and, build self-trust, the people that you're blaming may actually even be inspired to be a little bit more like you. Whereas if you're blaming them, you're going to become like them and become the thing that you don't want to be, right? So it's like, rather than blaming and then using your energy in that way, what I've come to realize is instead I can build my self-trust and I can start to stop blaming completely. Blaming is such a waste of energy. It's just a complete waste of my energy, and I don't see any value in my life that I'm getting from blaming people outside of me or anything like that, or any kind of like pointing fingers in that like negative way. All it does is ruin my self-trust, because while I'm blaming, there is zero alignment with who I prefer to be. Zero. There's zero alignment. I can sense when my heart begins to shut down when I'm simply blaming people. And that's why I do it as little as possible. And I really don't do it at all. But if I do notice I'm developing like an energy of like beginning to have a desire to blame somebody, I use that as a cue to do the opposite and to not do it. Because I've already seen I've already seen this pattern. I've already seen this type of emotion. What does it do for me? Yeah, it does nothing. It does nothing. All it does is bring me down and bring others down with me. So instead what I do is I use it as a cue to build my self-trust and to become a greater version of who I am. And then I feel a lot better. And then whether the person realizes it or not that I even wanted to blame, they're going to get some benefit from that, whether at a conscious or subconscious level, that will impact the world in a positive way. So I choose to not blame. Now, the third thing that I want to share with you is judging. Judging is a horrible thing for your self-trust. See, when you're judging people, that's also a waste of your energy, in my personal experience. Judging is one of the worst things you could do. Judging, what does judging ever do for you? All it does is it lowers your state, and it lowers that person's state too. And then you're basically fighting. It's this energy of like fighting. And fighting, what it does is it really does nothing for both parties, similar to blaming it. It's a little bit similar to blaming, but I would say it's a little bit different. But when you're judging, what you're doing is you're, again, wasting your energy on pointing fingers and seeing the flaws in somebody else. Now, I've come to realize that, and this is debatable, right? Abraham Hicks talks about this a lot, and I used to get a really weird feeling when I heard Abraham Hicks talks about this, but now I fully understand. And I completely agree with what Abraham Hicks is saying. Despite what many people will see this as, and I can see why people would disagree with this, and I feel almost obligated to keep talking about this information, even if many people won't see it or disagree with it, and I think that eventually people will see it. And they will begin to agree with it and just see it as the truth. It's not even a belief, it's more of a knowing. You know, there's a difference between believing and hoping for something and simply knowing something to be the truth in your own personal direct experience. And so what Abraham Hicks talks about is that if you're flying high in your own personal reality, you're not even going to see those negative versions of people. You just won't see them. And it sounds a little bit woo-woo and crazy, but is it? If you're so focused on building your dreams, if you're so focused on loving yourself and accepting all the things you hate about yourself, right? When you see that thing about yourself that you dislike, that you want to judge yourself for, that you want to that makes you just thinking about yourself in that way makes you feel like you're lowering your state. And so what you do is you accept that emotion, and then not only do you accept it, but you love it. And you choose to see it in a different way. You choose to reframe that situation, and you stop judging yourself, and you think of a greater possibility for your life that will help you to feel better, to become a greater person in whatever area that means to, whether it means to look better, whether it means to make more money, whether it means to do whatever, whether it's on your attractiveness and your looks, or your financial situation, or maybe your living situation, or or your job, or whatever, right? Most of the times when we're judging people, blaming, attacking, seeing negative versions of people, right? And it could be anybody. It could be anybody that you really think is oh, they are such a narcissist and they're so negative. Typically people that have a strong desire, and I'm not saying that we don't have, every person doesn't deep inside kind of have these desires come up sometimes. You know what I mean? Nobody is perfect. But the people that let themselves go down that road, more and more and more and more. And because again, I have a tendency to sometimes judge people. But what I do is I notice that and I'm no, I don't, I feel dirty even stepping into that kind of energy because I just know that it's doing nothing for me and the person. So typically people that have this energy of judging and blaming and criticizing, they have a really bad relationship with themselves. They're not able to accept their negative emotions and love them. And I think that there's a distinction, by the way, between accepting a negative emotion and then loving it. I think there's a big, I'm going to record a whole other video on the difference between accepting an emotion and then loving it. See, accepting a negative emotion is just allowing it to be there. But then loving it is a whole different thing. Loving it is turning that negativity and reframing it as a beautiful possibility. So it's not only do you accept it, but you turn it into gold. You take that darkest shadow of yourself, you take that negative version, you take that darkest version of you that you dislike, that you want to judge yourself for, and then judge yourself for judging yourself, and then judge yourself for judging yourself, and then judge yourself for judging, and you take all the entire negative feedback loop, and you say, you know what? Not only am I going to accept this, I'm going to love it. I'm going to love it to death until it dies, until it's no longer me. That judging, that emotional pattern of self-judgment, I'm just going to disidentify with it completely, and I'm going to turn it into something gold. And then you begin to love yourself more. You become more attractive from your own eyes, and people tend to usually see that as well, because how you see yourself is how people are going to see you. And then people are just going to see this, like, you know, this consciously crafted version of yourself, and think like, oh, they just had it easy. It's like, no, actually, most of the times, people that aren't judging, aren't complaining, and are in the energy of having what you want, typically have already been exactly where you are. You've overcome that pattern of self-inflicted resistance and self-inflicted pain, even though we never want to see it at the time. When we're judging ourselves, we want to blame, we want to think it's the external world. Nope. Most of the times it has very little to do, almost nothing to do with the external world. It's a pattern that we've chosen to be stuck in that we don't see as a choice, because we have such a strong momentum of blaming and judging. We've started to judge ourselves so much, and we hate ourselves so much. Again, I used to be like this, that we start just blaming other people, and then we distract ourselves. It's a distraction, right? Blaming other people and judging people, it's a distraction. What is it a distraction from? It's a distraction from building more self-trust and building more self-love. If you were dedicated to loving yourself, you just would see blaming and judging as a distraction from aligning with your true purpose. That's what you would see it as. And so, you know, with that being said, you would take that distraction and you would use it as a cue to go back into trust yourself more. That's how I do it, at least. You can take that, write that down if you want. You don't have to write it down, but that's what I do personally. I take blaming and judging, I take an energy of resistance, and I use that as a cue to build more self-trust. It's my cue. It's my sign. I choose to see it as a sign from the universe. I choose to see it in that way. It's a choice, right? As it's not that like oh, it's a grand sign from the universe. It's like, no, I choose to see it in that way. Now, the fourth thing that I want to share with you in this video, which is absolutely terrible for your self-trust, is to be problem focused. Okay, being problem focused is absolutely one of the worst things you can do for your self-trust, because like, I'm not saying to not see the problems. I think we should be hyper conscious and hyper alert and hyper aware of every problem and challenge that comes into our life that's out of alignment with our goal. I think it's critical. And to pretend that these problems don't exist is ignorance and unconsciousness of those problems that are out of alignment with your goal. But there's a lot of ignorance that happens there. Just too many factors to share in this video around that, because like, there's so many factors, such as, are you aligned with your goal? What is your lifestyle? You know, what are the relationships around you? All these different things, right? But generally speaking, if you're very focused on the problem and you're not willing to see the problem, that's going to be okay. So like, if you're not willing to see the problem, that's an issue for sure. But if you're so focused on the problem, that you have zero capacity left to see the solution, that's going to ruin your self-trust. I've come to realize that to solve problems in life, whether your own problems, whether to help give value to solve other people's problems, it takes a certain level of capacity. And what I mean by capacity is to be able to see the problem, but be able to view it from a higher perspective and not lose yourself in the problem. That doesn't mean not to see the problem. It means that if you want to become a problem solver in any area, whether you're a coach, whether you're a mentor, hey, even if you're a programmer, what do programmers do? Programmers solve problems. They take energy that's chaotic and frantic and causes problems for themselves and others, and they reprogram it. They literally reprogram it. They use code to reprogram it. And you can do that in your own life energetically as well. Energetically speaking, if you're so focused on the problem, at some point you manifest more of the problem. And then when you say that, people are like, oh my gosh, but like, you know, you're just going to run away from the problem. No, the key is to be able to see the problem, but not lose yourself in it. To be solution oriented. And to be solution oriented takes a certain level of disconnecting yourself from the problem, but still being able to see it. And then think of a greater solution that is like greater than the problem, you could say. So to be problem focused is a huge thing that will ruin your self-trust. So I encourage you to see the problems in your life, but not to lose yourself in them. Now, to conclude this video, the final thing that I want to share with you that will ruin your self-trust is this concept that I've created called letting yourself go. I mean, I didn't create this, but letting yourself go. And I want to be specific about this concept because I feel like a lot of people in that spiritual community talk about like just let go and just surrender and just trust the universe. And I can see how that can be useful for like some people, but for me personally, that mentality sort of gave me an excuse to like not be focused and live with intent in my life, if that makes sense. So for me, the concept of just let go and trust the universe and just like let go, I took that in the past as an excuse just to let myself go. Not in the good way, in the bad way. Like, you know, when somebody lets themselves go in a bad way, and you can see it in their body and their being and their eyes and their health, that's what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here, I'm trying to point you to a specific kind of energy that I've come to realize. You could call it comfort, you could call it being too comfortable, you could call it inaction, you could call it laziness, you call it, one funny way that I like to call it is I like to call it the haze, right? The haze is called the unconscious haze, right? It's just a funny way to look at it, but what I mean is to let yourself go. That's not what you want in your life. You don't want to be letting yourself step into that like lazy, like unconscious, like haze where you're not focused. I'm not saying you can't rest and take things slow, but I'm saying that there's an energy behind how you do things where you can feel in your being that you're letting yourself do something and be something that is out of alignment with your highest intent, which makes you feel sluggish and slow. And if you let yourself do that long enough, you will literally forget your natural state of being, which is quite natural, but we can believe that it's not when we've let ourselves go so much. See, when you have enough momentum with discipline and focus and being very, very alert and aware and mindful and connected to your presence as you do something, what started off as a very difficult task and something that you don't want to do becomes quite natural. And then so when it becomes so easy in a way, not easy, but it becomes, you could say natural. I don't want to say easy because like, you know, there's still going to be challenges and it's still going to be difficult sometimes, so to speak. But in another way, when you have enough momentum with this kind of discipline and flow in your life, what happens, you begin to sort of like, you begin to see that like that thing that you were so attached to, whatever it is in your life, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't think I could ever let this go. I don't think I could ever stop doing this. And so whatever it is, right? You become disciplined, you become in flow, and now you get repulsed. So that thing that you kind of like let yourself do, that you let yourself go in that negative way, that you were so attached that you really, really believed, I really need this, and oh my gosh, if I let this go, my life's gonna fall apart. You let it go and you become disciplined. Now you're like repulsed by it. You never want to go back to that space. It's like you start thinking like, how could I even have let myself do that to myself? How could I hurt myself in that way? You see this like called self-damage. It's like, oh, God, I was hurting myself. So what you want to begin to do is don't let yourself go in that way. Always be focused, always be connected, always be present as much as possible, and stay in that, you could say like high vibration, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, connected, present, mindful, disciplined, focused, attentful, mindful, whatever you want to call it. But the opposite of that lazy unconscious haze. And that lazy unconscious haze, nobody wants to hear it, but I'm going to conclude it right here, and I'm going to be going more in depth on this in a book coming out really, really soon called The Power of Choice, so stay tuned for that. Nobody wants to hear it, but I believe that that energy of, you could say, inaction and laziness and haziness, as much as many people want to disagree with this, I will continue over and over and over and over and over to say it again and again and again and again, that I believe it is a choice to let yourself go to that space. And with that, I conclude this video. Once again, if you want to work with me one-on-one personally, all the details for that will be down below. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next